Welcome to the first part of a series that I'm doing in reflection and conversation with Art is Therapy by Alain de Botton and John Armstrong. I read this book recently and it talks about changing the way that we look at art in our society and the role of museums. And I'm reflecting on Alain de Botton's theory that art can act as therapy and that there are certain ways that art can act that make us better or help alleviate the stressors of life. So I'll link you to my introduction of this series, where I kind of go more into depth of what I'm trying to do and the questions that I'm answering. For this first video, I'm working with the first purpose that art has, that according to Alain de Botton, which is that art can help us in remembering what's important. So I'm going to share with you some books that I think help me remember what's important, and I have these in two different categories. The first has to do with remembering events in history or in people's lives that are important. For this one, I'm going to begin with talking about some graphic memoirs. I think that graphic memoirs are a fascinating way of storytelling and of memory telling. So we have Persepolis, The Story of a Childhood by Marjane Satrapi. So this graphic memoir talks about Marjane's childhood and growing up in Iran during the Islamic Revolution, and talks about what it means to be an activist and what it means to grow up in a place of turmoil. And I think this helps me remember to look outside of my own life and to not just remain in my own little bubble. As I said before, I think graphic memoirs are really, and memoirs in general, are an interesting way of relaying what we or an author might think is important in their life. And I think that's something worth honoring and reading and paying attention to. The other graphic memoir that I think really fits into this idea of what we need to remember is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. I read this at the beginning of the year, and I think that it really taught me that remembering is about honoring truth and honoring your emotional connection to memories. So this is about Alison Bechdel and her reflecting on her relationship with her father as she went off to college, as she realized that she was gay. And it was really fascinating about how she recorded family dynamics without glorifying anything, and I think that was really important. The next book is one that stands in for two series of books that are of historical fiction that I absolutely consumed when I was younger, and so the one that I'm showing to you today is Marie Antoinette, Princess of Versailles, from the Royal Diaries series. There was also a Dear America series, and these were all historical fiction books that were written as diaries, as historical figures writing in their diaries. So I read the Queen Elizabeth I, and a Cleopatra one, and then numerous of the Dear America ones. These introduced me to historical figures as a young child. Historical fiction is really fascinating in that way, especially if they're structured like this, if they're introduced to a young child as being, here, read what someone in this time might have written about, what they might have been thinking when they were your age, which I really appreciate. The next two books are related. They discuss race in America and what it means to be an activist after the Civil Rights Movement. So those two books are The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin and The Fire This Time, edited by Jessamine Ward. I think these two books go together really well because they obviously are meant to go they play off of one another. The Fire This Time is very much inspired by Baldwin's. The Fire This Time is very much inspired by Baldwin's work. This is a collection of contemporary essays about race and about what it means to be a person of color, a black person in America, and how that might have changed from when Baldwin was writing. I think these are important for me to remember that the history of the place where I'm from isn't pretty, it isn't nice, it's still quite messed up in so many ways. I think these are books that really stress remembering that. The next 4 books fall under a kind of different way of interpreting this question of remembering, and that's and these are books that I have really strong memories attached to. So a lot of them, I think most of them, are ones that I have memories of being read aloud to, which is really important in my development as a reader. The first one is Jeremy Fink and the Meaning of Life by Wendy Mass. This is one of my favorite books, and it was always something that whenever people would ask me when I was younger what my favorite book was, I would just fall back on this. This follows the life of Jeremy Fink, who is about to turn 13, and he gets this box in the mail that's addressed from his dad, who passed away a couple years ago, and he has to go and find the keys. This book is adventurous, and it's funny, and it talks about family, the ones that you're given and the ones that you choose to accept into your life. It's a story that has a lot of like really positive memories of reading and feeling really connected to the character Jeremy Fink. The next book is The Lightning Thief by Riordan, and this includes the entire Lightning Thief series, and also the Kane Chronicles. So these are books that my mom used to read to my brother and I before we would go to bed. So we would set up a fire in the living room, and she would read, and my brother would draw, and I'd sit next to her and like follow along. And these were books that we absolutely loved and absolutely loved sharing together. They're funny, they're exciting and adventurous. I just like the memory of sitting down and listening to my mom read these to us. The next book is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is about a young orphan, Liesel, who's adopted in Germany during World War II, and this follows her life growing up and missing her family, and also creating and accepting the family around her. The school that I went to alternated curriculums, so the year that we read this, we were studying the Holocaust and World War II, whereas the year after, or the year before, we studied colonialism and the apartheid. This book I have very strong connections with. My humanities teacher read it out loud to us, and she was great at reading it aloud. She had very distinct voices for each of the characters, which is something that you expect from elementary school teachers, but going into junior high, I was like, oh no, they're not going to read out loud to us anymore. But it was a real treat at the end of every class to have her read a couple chapters. The last book that I want to talk about is also associated with a series, and that is Bloody Jack by L.A. Meyer. This is about a young girl in Victorian England who wants to escape her life as an orphan, and so she disguises herself as a boy to be admitted onto a ship as a ship boy. The first time that I read this book was when my aunt handed me the audio, like a disc audio, and I think I must have been like 12 or 13, and we were driving back from her house in Washington. And so it was a pretty long drive, and I was driving back with my grandpa and my brother, and we were listening to this, and it was so incredibly captivating. It stands out as one of my favorite series, because it's about this girl who's keeping her own in her life and doing what she needs to do in order to survive, and I found that really fascinating and really fun. So thank you for watching my reflection on the books that I would use to answer this question of what books help me remember what's important, whether they're facts that are important or whether they are memories that are important, and I'll see you in another video.